Hello everyone. Welcome to Tales of Light. Have you ever been told you were too much? Too emotional? Too loud? Too honest? Too intense? And slowly, you started to shrink yourself just to make other people comfortable. This is the story of a man named Antonio. A man who spent years trying to be smaller, quieter, safer. Until one day, life cornered him and forced him to ask a hard question. What if I was never too much? What if I was just in the wrong places, with the wrong people, believing the wrong story? Stay with this story until the end. Because if you have ever felt like you are too much, Antonio's life might change the way you see yourself forever. You might realize that the problem was never you. The problem was how small you were taught to be. Antonio grew up in a small apartment with thin walls and tired parents. His mother worked nights. His father worked early mornings. Silence made their lives easier. But Antonio was born with a loud heart. As a kid, he asked endless questions. Why is the sky pink at sunset? Why does Grandpa cry when he hears that one song? Why do some people sleep on the street while others live in big houses? To him, the world felt big and alive. Every feeling was bright. Every thought was loud. At family gatherings, he talked with his hands. He laughed from his stomach. He told long stories about school, about his friends, about his dreams. At first, it was cute. But as he grew older, the words around him started to change. You talk too much. You are too sensitive. Calm down. You are too dramatic. Why do you care so much? Nobody else thinks like that. He did not know it then, but with every comment, a small part of him started to step back. He started watching himself when he spoke. He lowered his voice, cut his stories short, swallowed his questions. By the time Antonio was in his 20s, he had a job in a marketing agency in the city. On paper, it was good. A steady paycheck, a clean office, a clear path upward. He was the guy with ideas, fresh concepts, bold campaigns, new angles. But even at work, the same words followed him. Antonio, this is a bit much. Tone it down. You are overthinking this. Clients do not want all that emotion. Keep it simple. He learned how to smile and say, sure, no problem. He learned how to make his ideas smaller, safer, more acceptable. Outside of work, it was not much different. In old friendships, he was often the one who cared more. Checked in more, texted first. Some people liked him, but also joked, "You are intense, man." Even in dating, a woman once told him after a few weeks, "You feel things too deeply. It is too much for me. Too much, too much, too much." Those words became a quiet echo in his mind, until he started to believe them. Maybe there really is something wrong with the way I feel. Maybe I'm just built wrong. So he adjusted. He stopped sharing his real thoughts in meetings. He stopped telling people when he was hurt. He learned how to smile on the surface and hide the storm underneath. From the outside, his life looked fine. Decent job, decent clothes, decent days. But inside, it was like living in a house with all the lights turned low. Nothing was really wrong, but nothing truly felt right. The breaking point did not look dramatic from the outside. There was no car crash, no big heartbreak, no shouting match. It was just a Monday morning meeting. Antonio's agency had been trying to win a big client, a national brand, a campaign that could change his career. He stayed late all weekend working on ideas. He poured himself into it. The story, the message, the emotion. He thought about how the ad could make people feel seen. He believed in it. But on Monday, when he walked into the glass-walled conference room, he felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Do not be too much. Do not overdo it. Keep it safe. He sat down, notebook in front of him, heart pounding. His manager, a calm man in a gray suit, walked in and started the meeting. "All right, team. We need something strong but simple. Nothing too risky." People went around the table sharing small, safe ideas. Light jokes, catchy phrases, pretty visuals. Antonio felt his pages burning under his hands. Finally, his manager looked at him. "Antonio, you had a lot of thoughts, right? What do you have?" For a moment, the room went quiet. He could have played it safe, given them one small idea. But something inside him was tired. Tired of shrinking. Tired of pretending. So he took a breath and said, "I do have something. It is a bit bigger, but I think it could really connect with people." He stood up and started to share. He talked about real people, real struggles, real feelings. He described scenes, stories, faces. He spoke with his hands again, like when he was a kid. His voice had color. His eyes had light. For a few minutes, he forgot to be small. When he finished, the room was silent. His manager cleared his throat and gave a tight smile. "It is a lot, Antonio." We said simple. "This feels too heavy, too emotional. We need something cleaner. You always go so deep with this stuff." "It is just an ad." The word "too" hit him again. Too heavy. Too deep. Some co-workers avoided his eyes. One smirked at another, like they had seen this show before. Antonio sat down slowly. His ears rang. His hands felt cold. After the meeting, he went to refill his water bottle. On the way back, he passed by the break room and heard his name. He paused just outside the door. "He is extra, man." One voice he recognized. Every time, it is like a movie with him. "It is not that serious." Another voice laughed. "Yeah, he feels like he is auditioning for some emotional TED Talk." Antonio froze. For a second, he thought about walking in. But instead, he walked past quietly, his throat tight. That day, something in him cracked. He started deleting his notes before meetings. Stopped raising his hand. Nodded along with ideas he did not care about. At home, he stopped sharing his dreams, even in his own head. He distracted himself with shows, scrolling, noise. But the more he tried to be less, the heavier life felt. He woke up tired. He carried a kind of sadness he could not explain. One evening, he visited his older sister, who lived across town with her little daughter, Sophia. Sophia was 6. She had his same big eyes, his same loud laugh. She ran into him with open arms. "Uncle Antonio, guess what? I made a story at school today. It was so long, and my teacher said I talk a lot, but I do not care." She laughed, proud of herself. Something in his chest twisted. At dinner, Sophia talked and talked. About school, about her drawings, about how the sky looked like cotton candy that day. At one point, their mother smiled and said gently, "Sophie, slow down. You are a lot." The words made Antonio flinch. Later that night, when Sophia went to her room, his sister looked at him and said, "You are quiet tonight. Everything okay?" He almost said, "I am fine." But the question hung in the air. Is it really fine to live like this? Is it really fine to keep shrinking until nothing of you is left? That night, back in his apartment, Antonio lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling. What if Sophia grows up believing she is too much? What if she ends up like me, afraid of her own feelings? The thought made his heart hurt in a way he could not ignore anymore. A few weeks later, the agency lost that big client to a competing firm. Rumor around the office was that the winning pitch had been emotional, powerful, human. Exactly the kind of thing Antonio had wanted to do. When he heard that, he felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Not at his coworkers, at himself. I had it. I had that kind of idea, and I talked myself out of it. One evening, his manager asked him to stay late. "We need to talk, Antonio." They sat in the small meeting room. The city was dark outside, office lights humming quietly. His manager folded his hands. "Look, you have talent. Everyone knows that. But clients need simple, fast work. Sometimes it feels like you are a bit much for what we do here. Maybe this role is not the best fit for how you are wired. A bit much." There it was again. Antonio listened, chest tight, nodding politely. In the end, they agreed he would finish the month and then leave. On the train ride home, he watched his reflection in the window as the city blurred past. Too much for my family. Too much for friends. Too much for work. He suddenly felt tired of the words. Tired all the way down to his bones. At the next stop, an older woman got on the train and sat across from him. She had soft eyes and a worn tote bag full of art supplies. She noticed the sadness on his face and said gently, "Long day?" He gave a small laugh. "You could say that." She smiled. "You look like someone who thinks a lot and feels even more." He blinked, surprised. They began to talk. He did not tell her everything, but he shared enough. How he always felt too intense. How people told him he was too much. How he had just lost his job for basically being himself. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "Let me tell you something," she said. "I used to be told I was too much too. Too passionate. Too emotional. Too serious about art. So I tried to get smaller for years. Do you know what happened?" "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Nothing happened. No one came to save me. My life just got dimmer and dimmer until one day I realized I did not even recognize myself." "So what did you do?" She smiled and looked out the window for a moment. "I decided that if I am too much, then I am just not in the right rooms yet. I stopped trying to fit into spaces that asked me to shrink. I started looking for places that needed my full light." Her words sank into Antonio's chest like a warm stone. "Not in the right rooms yet." She continued, "The world tells big-hearted people they are too much because it is easier than admitting it is too little for them. But listen, your feelings, your ideas, your depth, that is not a problem to fix. That is your gift." He felt his eyes burn. Nobody had ever called his intensity a gift before. "What if people do not like it?" he asked quietly. "Then those are not your people," she said, calm and sure. "The right people are waiting for the version of you that you keep hiding." The train slowed as her stop approached. She stood up, adjusted her bag, and looked at him one last time. "Do not spend your one life apologizing for the size of your soul, Antonio. The world needs people who feel deeply. Do not dim that." And then she was gone. He sat there, the train moving again, heart pounding. For the first time, he wondered, what if I am not too much? What if I am exactly how I am meant to be? What if the real problem is that I have spent my whole life trying to fit into boxes that were never meant for me? That night, back at home, Antonio took out his old notebooks. Ideas, stories, campaigns he had never shared. He flipped through page after page of himself. He felt something shift. Not a loud explosion, just a quiet decision. I am done being less than I am. Over the next few months, Antonio's life did not magically become perfect. There was no overnight success. But something important changed inside him. He made himself a promise. From now on, I will not call my depth a problem. I will not call my passion an issue. If someone thinks I am too much, they are simply not my place. He started small. When a friend made a joke about him being dramatic, he did not just laugh it off. He said calmly, "I feel things deeply. That is part of who I am. If that is too much for you, that is okay, but I am not going to apologize for it." It felt strange at first, to stand up for himself without anger, just truth. But it also felt honest. He updated his resume, not hiding his big projects and emotional campaigns, but leaning into them. He applied for roles at companies that talked about storytelling, impact, and meaning. At one interview, the creative director asked, "You seem very passionate about emotion in your work. Do you really think ads should go that deep?" Antonio took a breath. The old version of him would have softened his answer. Now, he looked the director in the eyes and said, "Yes, I do. People are tired of surface-level things. I think good work should make people feel seen. I know it might be too much for some places, but that is the kind of work I want to do." The director studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good. We need people like that here. Antonio walked out of that building with something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. He did not change who he was to fit that job. Instead, he finally found a place that matched who he already was. Slowly, things on the inside began to heal. He talked more openly with his family. He told his sister about how those words, "You are a lot," can land on a child's heart. She listened, and the next time Sophia talked too much at dinner, she smiled and said, "You have such a big, beautiful voice, Sophie. Let us hear it." One afternoon, Antonio sat on a park bench while Sophia told him another long, wild story. He looked at her bright eyes and loud laugh and thought, "Never let the world convince you that your fire is a flaw." And in that moment, he realized something simple but powerful. He had spent his whole life thinking he was too much. But the truth was this: he was never too much. He was just too much for people who had made themselves small. He was too much for jobs that only wanted half-hearted work. Too much for rooms that feared real feelings. But for the right people, for the right places, for the right purpose, he was not too much at all. He was the perfect size. So what is the moral of Antonio's story? It is this: never be too much for yourself. Never be too much for your own life. If someone tells you that you are too emotional, remember, that emotion is how you connect. If they say you care too much, remember, that care is how things change. If they say you are too intense, remember, that intensity is how mountains move. You do not need to become smaller to be loved. You need to be honest about who you are, so the right people can find you. You are not a problem to be fixed. You are a whole person to be understood. So now, think about your own life for a moment. Where have you been told you are too much? Too talkative, too quiet but too deep, too emotional, too ambitious, too honest, too different? Whose voice is still living in your head when you try to speak, create, love, or dream? Maybe it was a parent who did not know how to handle their own feelings. Maybe it was a teacher who needed a quieter classroom. Maybe it was a friend, a partner, a boss who felt small next to your light and tried to dim it instead of growing their own. Ask yourself this: have you been living your life in rooms that are too small for your soul? Because that is what Antonio did for years. He tried to fit his big heart into tiny spaces. He tried to fold himself into shapes that made other people more comfortable. And it almost worked. He almost disappeared into a version of himself that was easier to accept. But the cost was too high. It cost him his joy, his energy, his sense of self. You only get one life, one heart, one voice. If you spend it all trying not to be too much, you might end up being nothing at all like yourself. You are not here to be a watered-down version of your own soul. You are here to be fully you, with all your color and depth and weirdness and warmth. Some people will not understand it. That is okay. They are not meant to. Others will look at you, the way that creative director looked at Antonio, and say, "Good. We need people like that here." Your job is not to twist yourself to be small enough for every room. Your job is to find the rooms, the people, the work, the life that fit the size of your heart. Never be too much for your own dreams. Never be too much for your own story. Because somewhere, someone is waiting for the exact version of you that you keep hiding. If Antonio's story touched something in you, do not just let it pass. Ask yourself, right now, where have you been shrinking? Where have you started to believe that you are too much? And if someone's face came to mind, or a certain memory, hold it gently. Not to blame them, but to understand yourself. You deserve to live a life where your full self is welcome at the table. If this story gave you even a little bit of courage, a little bit of relief, or a new way to see yourself, then let it keep working in you. Share in the comments which part of Antonio's journey felt most familiar to you. Was it the family words, the work meeting, the train conversation, or that quiet decision to stop shrinking. Your story might be the one that helps someone else feel less alone. If you want more stories that light up the soft, hidden parts of your heart, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who has been told they are too much, and subscribe to Tales of Light. Because here, your depth is not a problem. Your feelings are not too loud. Your story is not too much. Here, you are welcome exactly as you are.